أنا بالأخير All right. Welcome to Dearborn Open Mic. I know there's a delay. I will start with the following land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that we are gathered on the ancestral lands of the Anishinaabe Nation. We recognize the crimes that were committed against the indigenous people of the land when it was colonized by European forces and bandits. We recognize the pain and betrayal the indigenous people have felt when the US government abrogated several treaties with the Indian tribes. We recognize their enduring connection to this territory and express respect for their resistance As immigrants to this land, now known as Michigan, we honor the histories and cultures of the indigenous people across all occupied lands, past and present, and pledge that we will stand with the oppressed and fight against occupation, ethnic cleansing, and genocide everywhere and every time till peace pervades earth. Welcome to Dearborn Open Mic, a program proudly brought to you by the Arab American Center for Culture and Arts, media covered by Dearborn Blog and hosted by the Center of Arab American Studies. DOME stands as an exceptional platform offering a unique space where individuals can congregate and freely express themselves. It serves as a veritable stage where creativity and diversity are not only celebrated, but also showcased. Dearborn Open Mic provides a warm and supportive environment for people from diverse backgrounds to share their stories, ideas, and talents, regardless of one's origin, native language, or profession, all embraced with open arms. Since its inception in 2017, Dearborn Open Mic has curated a rich tapestry of events, including poetry readings, storytelling sessions, live music performances, and open mics. These gatherings serve as a creative playground for artists to unveil their talents and connect with like-minded individuals. However, Dearborn Open Mic transcends mere expression. It fosters a vibrant community where people can come together, break down barriers, and celebrate diversity. It's a place where individuals discover a sense of belonging and unity, a safe haven for the exchange of ideas. It's important to note that nothing expressed Okay, back. Today we have a special program and we find ourselves playing with acts from Gaza or what has been a genocide that has thrust upon us the daily horrors via social media once we never imagined we would witness. As Imam Ilahi has noted, alongside Gaza genocide, we are also witnessing a genocide of morals. The media, news agencies, public figures, and world organizations have seemingly forsaken the principles and ideals of the 21st century, regressing us to a period where the law of the jungle reigns and one's skin color determines their humanity or lack thereof. Culture and intellect, when divorced from the pressing humanitarian challenges of our time, immediately become hypocritical. Therefore, here at Dearborn Open Mic, we expect and prioritize segments that reinforce our humanity and address its most pressing challenges. Our first guest, appropriately, is David Finkel, who is a Detroit activist and editor of the journal Against the Current. And he is a member of the Jewish Voices for Peace Detroit, and he will speak about it. Against the Current is an analytical and activist journal sponsored by Solidarity. Solidarity is a socialist, feminist, anti-racist organization formed in 1986. JVP expresses its vision online saying, "We envision a world where all people from the US to Palestine live in freedom, justice, equality, and dignity. Like generations of Jewish leftists before us, we fight for the liberation of all people. We believe that through organizing, we can and will dismantle the institutions and structures that sustain injustice and grow something new, joyful, beautiful, and life-sustaining in their place. JVP has shown to be one of the most formidable organizations fighting for the freedom of Palestinians. From the first days of the genocide, they have created a sit-down at Grand Terminal in New York, shutting down Congress, shutting down New York Times, and more than I can count of protests. They delivered a very loud message that history cannot miss. Zionism and Judaism are two different things, and many Jews view Zionism as anti-Jewish. David will tell us more about JVP and responding to the genocide in Gaza. Welcome, David.
Well, thank you so much for the invitation. It's great to see everybody. Also great to see Christa from my neighborhood. And if you don't have her book, you need to get it. But I'm here representing the Detroit chapter of Jewish Voice for Peace. I'm very grateful for the invitation. You've heard something about JVP in the very generous introduction. JVP started out in California as a local group in, I believe, 1996. And as it was becoming a national organization, our Detroit chapter formed in 2005 and has been active since then. Since October 7th, JVP nationally and certainly in Detroit has been growing, I have to say, explosively, both in terms of our activist core and in the activities we carry out. The principles on which JVP is organized are basically a commitment to the principles of equal justice, equal security, and equal peace for Israelis and Palestinians. That's the principle. What that's going to look like in terms of drawing a map, not my thing. I don't have the competence to do that. That has to be done on the ground when the barriers and the obstacles to peace and justice are removed, or at least significantly turned back. Now, in the disastrous 6 months since October 7th, the 6 months of the killings on October 7th, and then the genocide in Gaza, I'm sure you follow it extensively, but there's a few things to say about it. It's not the first genocide in recent times by any means. It's not the only genocide going on right now, but it's the first genocide in history that is live streamed. Okay, and that poses both a trauma and a tremendous moral challenge, because you can't turn away from it. The other thing about it, that while Palestine has undergone a whole series of historical disasters, this is the first fully joint U.S.-Israeli genocide. Okay, that is, the United States has been backing Israel more and more, especially since 1967. But in this case, the United States is a full and complete participant in what's going on. And for people who don't like the word genocide, and in some quarters it's considered, a terrible thing to say, treif, as you say in Hebrew, or haram in Arabic. The truth is that if you look at the United Nations Convention on the Prevention of Genocide, and you look at Article 2, there are 5 criteria for what constitutes genocide. That is, the attempt to destroy in whole or part a national, religious, or ethnic, or some identifiable group. And you can see that 4 of the 5 correspond exactly to what Israel, with full U.S. support, is doing in Gaza. If you want to know what the 5th one is, the 5th one is kidnapping of children, okay? That's what Vladimir Putin has been indicted for by the International Criminal Court, but that's a separate thing. The other 4 criteria, and you can look them up, fully correspond to what's happening in Gaza. Now, as I'm sure you know, because when we talk about things like this, I believe we always have to start, we really have to start at home. We have to start with ourselves. As I'm sure you know, there are huge attacks on Palestinian, Arab, and Muslim community activity and activism, including horrible attacks on campus freedom of speech and activity in support of Palestine. I'm sure you know about the situation at U of M with the attempt to impose this absolutely, I have to say, illegal and unconstitutional attack on so-called obstruction of activity. You can just imagine the breadth to which that could be applied. So you know what's happening at the University of Michigan, I'm sure, and in many other places it's much worse. There is a severe rise throughout our society in both Islamophobia and anti-Semitism, that is, attacks on Muslims and sometimes people who aren't Muslims, but who some people think look like Muslims, and on Jews. Islamophobia and anti-Semitism, both forms of racism, which always frankly go together, okay? When racism rises up and shows its head in this country, anti-Semitism and Islamophobia always go along for the ride. And we see that in all kinds of political expressions. Now, as far as talking about Jewish Voice for Peace and what we do and the movement that we're a part of, one thing I like to say in Jewish Voice for Peace is that we plead guilty to the charge that the day of October 7th, on October 8th, we refuse to forget everything that we knew on October 6th. As many progressive folks in our Jewish community, in our churches, in progressive circles and so on, all of a sudden they forgot what they knew on October 6th. There for a long time had been a real degenerative spiral of violence against Palestinians, an escalation of violence in the West Bank. Gaza, since 2007, had been turned into what is often called the world's largest open-air prison, and there's a lot of truth to that. But I don't totally like that, because calling it an open-air prison tends to hide from us the fact that it's also a society with families, with institutions, with a medical care system, with universities, and other kinds of social service institutions built up by people in Gaza under very difficult and trying circumstances. And that is what has now been destroyed, physically destroyed, socially destroyed, reduced to famine. We refuse to forget what we knew on October 6th, that this was all building up. And what we saw on October 8th, when we saw what Israeli government officials, to say nothing of the extreme right wing and the settlers, the overt Nazi types like Ben-Gvir and Smotrich were saying, when we heard what Israeli political and military officers were saying, we are dealing with human animals and we will act accordingly. There are no innocent civilians in Gaza. We will block everything. Nothing will get in, nothing will go out. No food, no electricity, no water. Okay, when we heard them say those things, we knew what it meant. We knew what that meant, both from our overall understanding of what that kind of rhetoric means. That was the rhetoric, for example, of the Rwanda genocide in 1994. And we also know it from specific occurrences in Jewish history. We knew what that meant. We knew that it pointed towards genocide. And we were not afraid to say that from the very first day. We saw it coming. And even though United States government officials either didn't know or pretended not to know, because I can't believe that they're all that stupid, not to understand what that kind of rhetoric means, we knew what was coming. And JVP began responding to that immediately, along with others. The other thing that I like to emphasize is that what we are doing makes a difference. And here, when I say what we are doing, by we, I don't just mean Jewish Voice for Peace. I mean the entire movement, mass outcry in this country and globally, demanding an immediate ceasefire. There are other Jewish groups like If Not Now. There are many peace organizations. There are the Palestinian and Arab community organizations. You know many of them. And when I say what we are doing makes a difference, is that the outcry for a ceasefire has moved the needle. Not nearly enough and not nearly fast enough. But we are not just crying in the wilderness. And I like to emphasize that because it often seems that the situation is hopeless. When we demand an immediate ceasefire, that doesn't mean that a ceasefire would solve the fundamental problems, which I don't think I need to elaborate on here. But this war is not solving any fundamental problems. This war is making everything worse. This, quite frankly, is not a war that Gaza or Palestine can win. That doesn't necessarily mean that Israel will win. There are wars that nobody wins. You can go in a different context to the Iran-Iraq War of the 1980s. Terribly destructive wars for both societies. Nobody won. What's happening in Israel is something that's also important to pay attention to, because there has been a political crisis in Israel. It is now resurfacing. What's driving this war is not only the long-term aim of the Zionist movement to basically eradicate Palestinian life. It's also driven by the short-term needs of the Netanyahu coalition to hold itself together. Because if that coalition falls, Netanyahu goes on trial and probably goes to jail. So he needs to be in power in order to keep himself from being prosecuted and imprisoned. If that sounds vaguely familiar to something that might be going on here, well, you can draw your own conclusions. But it's driven by all of that. And the destruction of Gaza is beyond belief. But also inside Israel, that political crisis is resurfacing. And I believe that it is likely to take on a violent form, because one of the far-right Israeli government ministers, you may know his name, Itamar Ben-Gvir, who's in charge of the West Bank settlers, he has handed out thousands of automatic rifles to the settlers. Those are being used, and this goes under the radar screen. It's not covered nearly enough. These are being used on Palestinian villagers, 16 of which have already been basically forced to, abandon their villages in the West Bank. And as the crisis in Israel polarizes, it will be used in Israel's internal conflicts as well. So the situation is very extreme, and I'm not even getting into here. I'm deliberately leaving out the camp with Israel and Iran. If we want to talk about that, we can get it into the discussion. But even without that, the situation is desperate, almost beyond description. I think you all know that, and that is what we are attempting to respond to. Thanks.
Thank you, David. Can we take a couple of questions? Any questions from the audience? I have a question first, David. As far as the Jewish community, is there any statistic on how diverse are the opinions within it regarding the war?
Well, yes, and I have to say, when you talk about the Jewish community in the United States, it is quite diverse, and there's left, center, and right. But what's happening in Jewish public opinion, in Jewish opinion, is not something separate from what is happening in the United States as a whole. Okay, there is majority sentiment in this country among the general population for a ceasefire. Within the Democratic Party voting base, that sentiment is overwhelming. And the Jewish community is not, the Jewish community is not something separate from that. Of course, there's a polarization, okay? There are forces in the Jewish community who think that Israel should, quote, finish the job, okay? And you hear that, you actually hear that more from the extreme fundamentalist Christian, evangelical Christian sector than you do from Jews, although, that sentiment does exist. But I would say by now that there is probably, and I don't have immediate polling figures. I think there is a majority Jewish opinion in this country that wants this thing to end, okay? Even though it's not clear and is in favor of stopping the bloodshed and bringing it to an end. Although I think it's fair to say that people are very conflicted and confused as to how to do that.
Thank you. Any other question?
So, is this mic on, or should I just project my voice? Okay.
No, it's just for the...
Okay. So, do you have any suggestions to where you think people could better educate themselves or receive their news? Because obviously, here in America, the American media outlets are not super consistent or honest with what really is going on. So, like for example, I look at Al Jazeera often, but when you shared that they're supplying thousands of weapons to settlers in the West Bank, like that's something that I hadn't heard yet before, even with as much research as I've been doing. So I just wanted to know if you had any suggestions as to where we could learn more.
Right. Well, of course, Al Jazeera is good, which is why the Israeli government has banned it in Israel. And of course, there are tremendously brave journalists in Palestine and Gaza who are being targeted. I believe close to 200 now have been killed in what are obviously, deliberate military operations. There's an Israeli online magazine called Plus 972. 972 is that's their television, that's their telephone code. That's why look up Plus 972. They have a lot of coverage. Okay. In terms of regular media, I do listen to the BBC World Service News Hour. You get better coverage on BBC than you do on most American media. I'm not up watching TV late at night, but I understand that late at night, like after midnight, CNN International does a lot of good coverage. Okay, that you don't see, that you don't really see. I'm really struck when I look at cable news. I mean, there occasionally, for example, look at MSNBC. Occasionally, they do some very striking reporting, but they're heavy hitters like Lawrence O'Donnell. if you want to go to a total Gaza-free and Palestine-free zone, just watch them from 10 to 11. You'll be amazed. You'll get all the updates on the Trump trial, and you'll get the infomercial for whatever Democratic candidate is running for whatever. But you will never see anything. Okay, so that's, and of course, MSNBC got rid of Mehdi Hassan, who was their most powerful pro-Palestinian voice. So you're right about the media. But look at Plus 972, look at Al Jazeera, look at Jadalia. And I also subscribe to Haaretz, which gives you a pretty good picture of the disastrous state of Israeli politics if you want to get if you want to get deep into those weeds.
Thank you. We can take one more question. Yes.
So I know Jewish Voice for Peace is really working hard to kind of challenge the conflation of criticism of Israeli policy and
Anti-Semitism.
Anti-Semitism. Thank you. And I just wonder if you could talk about how successful that is, and also given the crackdown on campuses and in the employment arena, and then how that translates into change on the ground in Israeli society, given that I think it's like over 90% of Jewish Israelis think that the military effort in Gaza isn't going far enough. So how do we translate the incredible work that the Jewish community is doing here and allies to change on the ground in Israeli society?
Okay, well, there were some couple of folks here from a group in Israel called Standing Together, which is a group of, it consists of both Jewish Israelis and Palestinian citizens of Israel, what are called sometimes the 48 Palestinians, and they work together to against the attacks that are going on Palestinian communities and so on. And I ask them, what is it that Israeli citizens, that Jewish Israeli citizens see in their media? If they, if they get their news from TV and they don't read Plus 972 and Haaretz and things like that. And the answer was, they get their news from TV and they don't see what's going on in Gaza. They see, the brave IDF soldiers. They don't see what's happening in Gaza. That will break through. That's not something we can really do, but it will break through, okay? There are very good journalists in Israel, both Palestinian and Jewish journalists. People like Amira Haas, Gideon Levy. But in terms of anti-Semitism and this conflation that you're talking about, one of the weapons that the Israel apologists and the Zionist movement use is a document called from something called the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, talking about what anti-Semitism is. And it says, of course, many of the right things, contempt for Jews as a people, as a race, all that kind of thing. And then it says, denial of the right of Jewish self-determination. Well, this is completely false, because while there is certainly an Israeli Jewish nation, the Jews of the world are not a collective political entity, not a nation, okay? So this is weaponizing the charge of anti-Semitism in order to make it practically illegal to criticize, let alone condemn, Zionism as an Israeli, as a Jewish supremacist force. there is an alternative, a document written specifically as an alternative to the IHRA, which you can look up. It's called the Jerusalem Declaration. And it's much more solid. It's not necessarily perfect, but it's much more solid. So I suggest using that as a counter. As to what's going to influence Israel, you know, eventually the truth has a way of getting through. Israeli propagandists, Israeli officials already know, and they knew this before October 7th, okay? They said openly, our main support in the United States does not come from the Jewish community. Our main support comes from the right-wing evangelical Christian community, okay? They were saying that before October 7th. And I do happen to listen to one particular Christian Zionist outlet, and boy, don't get me started on that. But that's been the case for quite some time. So,
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Dave, and thank you for the Jewish Voiceful piece. I'm going to skip some of the recordings we have just for the sake of time. I'm going to go to Nisreen, who is a local poet. She has a new poem for us that she's going to premiere today.
Assalamu alaikum. So I still don't have a decided title for this poem, but it's done, it's complete, it's just ready to be heard by all of you today. When we speak our words and they go unheard, do they float away, fly like the birds? No, I know God is listening. When I hold your hand, spontaneous, unplanned, does your heart skip a beat? Are you a sentimental man? Yes. Pull me close to your chest, let me hear it. I hold on to you, guilt-ridden, trying to leave my intrusive thoughts hidden, seeking solace and also avoiding the present that God has written. But I am grief-stricken, mourning the loss of each Palestinian martyred in this genocide, while I pathetically hide in the country that funds it. In this world, there is horror everywhere that I turn. I try to hide behind my books, trying to selfishly catch a break, seeking out even the most temporary of escapes, because there are so many nights that I lay awake, the torment and the sadness makes me ache. I close my eyes and I am plagued by vivid images of the Palestinian people being ethnically cleansed, while I live in the country that emphasizes how the means justify the ends. They use my tax dollars to spend and spend on endless bombardments. Then there are so many people here who have claimed to be friends, ignorantly staying silent, or worse, they loudly defend the right that Israel and the United States has to kill 30,000 plus Palestinians since October 7. But this traces back to well before 1948, which they can't comprehend. Genocide making history, genocide that transcends. Palestinian souls are not statistics. Each life lost is a paved stone path that leads to beautiful bridges that connect across over sparkling rivers that stream through an infinite forest that shelter all the beautiful things of this world. I think about all the blood spilt, and I try to shove out all of this misplaced guilt, because there is nothing wrong with wanting to be held when we witness their pain, to feel compassion when I think of Palestinian lives slain. Is this not what makes me human? Is this not what makes us human? And I've said that in this world there's horror everywhere that I turn, and it's true, but in this world there is beauty everywhere too. When mosques and churches are being bombed, their walls burning down to the ground in flames, the people of Palestine continue to pray. The people of Palestine continue to pray. They are praying and pleading and calling out to God. Do you think that their words are flying away with the birds? After all we have observed, I cannot and will not believe that they would go unheard. No, I know God is listening. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Nisreen. We are lucky today to have Dr. Christa Bruhn, who's going to honor us for the second time at the Dearborn Open Mic. And we're going to call Dr. Wissam Maligi, Director of the Arab American Center for Arab American Studies, to introduce Dr. Bruhn.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. Talking about her memoir, Crossing Borders, A Search for Dignity in Palestine. We are delighted to have Christa Bruhn, who is an award-winning American author, photographer, culinary artist, with a lifelong passion for peace and justice. She is the daughter of a German immigrant raised under Nazi Germany and the mother of 3 Palestinian Americans. She holds degrees in international studies, a BA, a master's in Middle Eastern and North African studies, and a PhD in educational leadership and policy analysis. She has published academic work in Palestine, peace education, and diversity, and Lana participated in roundtables on the future of Palestine and Israel. She splits her time between Madison, Wisconsin, and among her extended family in the farming village of Jalama, Palestine. Before welcoming Dr. Bruhn, I also want to acknowledge the support of the University of Michigan Dearborn for the Center for Arab American Studies and for the potential to make this happen, which is not an easy occasion on many other campuses. I thank you all for being here.
Hey everyone, good to be back. This is some Tatris. So I'm going to read just a few passages from my memoir, Crossing Borders, The Search for Dignity in Palestine. I published this last year for the 75th commemoration of the Nakba, which is also the 75th anniversary of the establishment of the State of Israel. And this covers like 30 years of my life, my impressions of Palestine. So you get to see Palestine through my eyes. I'm going to start with a passage from chapter 33 called Rachel Corrie. For those of you who don't know, Rachel Corrie was an American activist who went to Gaza to protest or to stand literally in the way of homes being bulldozed in Gaza. And that was back in 2003. For those of you who don't know what happened to her, you'll find out. But I'm going to start there because her birthday was just a month ago, and the anniversary of her death was just a week ago. So this goes back. All the years I traveled to Palestine, I was aware of my privilege as an American. I know the Israeli army can detain or kill Palestinians without consequences, but I've never worried that anything could happen to me. I'm an American citizen, and by extension, I'm Israel's benefactor. I'm untouchable. It's this belief that lets my eyes lock onto those of soldiers at checkpoints, gives me the courage to demand the soldiers open the road when it's closed, keeps me committed to holding the state of Israel accountable for land confiscations, harassment of Palestinians, violations of human rights and international law. My privilege is my protection. When I first hear of Rachel Corrie's death in Gaza, I'm in disbelief. Aware of her own privilege as a white American, Rachel attempted to make a dent in the injustice in Palestine until her life was cut short in Gaza. A European American girl in her 20s run over by an Israeli bulldozer. It can't be true. Israel wouldn't dare kill a Westerner, especially not an American. Well, we all know that's not true anymore. The Israelis crossed the line and plowed through her veil of protection. Rachel is dead. My belief is shattered with her death. I learned Rachel went to Gaza to protest the demolition of homes in Rafah, that she put her body between a Palestinian home and the bulldozer, and that the bulldozer ran right over her. That was March 16th, 2003. Officially, the Israeli army was conducting a military operation to demolish Palestinian homes, seize weapons, and locate smuggling tunnels across the border with Egypt. Rachel and 7 other international solidarity movement activists were engaged in non-violent direct action to protest the home demolitions when one of the two bulldozers involved in the operation ran over her and killed her. I recall seeing the border in Rafah when I was in Gaza in 1986. It was then that the director of Save the Children showed me the beginnings of a water treatment facility buried in the sand. I saw the way families separated by the border called to each other across the fence. Now Israel has started an operation to bulldoze homes in Rafah, allegedly to give a wider buffer on the border with Egypt, similar in principle to the clearing of the Lebanese border areas in 1948. But instead of whole villages, houses were the targets. The people of Rafah lost their homes and their dignity. Rachel lost her life. Rachel's parents' lives are shattered with her death. A further slap in the face are the disappointing outcomes of a series of investigations and court cases from 2005 through 2015, culminating in Israeli Supreme Court hearings that absolve the Israeli military of any guilt or violation of human rights. The Supreme Court deems her death an unfortunate accident and claims the driver of the bulldozer could not have seen her, even though she was clearly marked. Moreover, the court rules that the Israeli military cannot be held accountable for violations of human rights because the incident took place during wartime. Nasser's father's words ring in my ears. The war is not over. Despite Rachel's parents' frustration over the lack of justice for their daughter's death, they carry Rachel's message forward through the establishment of the Rachel Corrie Foundation for Peace and Justice. I recall my time in Gaza where I witnessed the hardship of living there, the heavy Israeli military presence that rode past my window and nearly got my brother shot on the beach. I recall my own experience of standing up to the army to open the road closed for shooting practice. Could that have been me, my brother? How will I respond the next time I come face to face with the Israeli army? So part of what I think what I'm reading today will illustrate is how what's happening in Palestine is nothing new. I mean, this whole situation goes back to the beginning of Zionism over 100 years ago, and Palestinians have been demanding dignity in their homeland, the right to live with dignity in their homeland for some time. With all the emphasis on Gaza, we may not hear as much about what's going on in the West Bank, but what I'm about to read is just one of many restrictions on Palestinian life and livelihood in the West Bank. And I'm going to read from the chapter, The Wall. I think I'm going to skip forward. Sometimes people ask me, Palestine, where is that? I always respond with a question. Do you know where Israel is? They always provide the same answer. Yes, of course. Well, then you know where Palestine is. Palestine is Israel. Israel is Palestine. True and so far from the truth, one and the same and yet as different as night and day. When does night become day and day become night? Where are the borders in time and space between them? What do you call a place with two names, two peoples, two histories, two languages, many cultures and world religions? I'm heartbroken to have those wall segments imprinted on my memory. I've just witnessed the wall being built in front of me. I wonder how many years until those trucks will load the segments back up and take them away to be ground up to make roads, roads that connect the land, not divide it. Will I get to see the wall come down? Will I get to remember both its construction and destruction? I'm tired of checkpoints. It's one thing to cross them as a college student in Berlin, young, optimistic, full of energy and promise. Now I'm tired. I don't want to stand in lines and breathe in the frustration of people unable to get where they need to go. Witness the self-righteousness of border guards hiding behind uniforms and M16s. I don't want to wonder when the next clashes between Palestinian youth and Israeli soldiers will break out. I don't want to keep hearing about death and detention. I don't want to witness any more bombings in Gaza, land confiscations, or closed areas. I don't want to stare at olive trees through barbed wire, calling to their owners to trim the branches and harvest their fruit. Those trees that now lie on the other side of the wall must be lonely that their owners are only allowed to visit them twice a year, once to trim, only once, and once to harvest in a hurried fashion. No lingering to sit beneath their branches. What is so dangerous about caring for trees? Like inmates in a high security prison, these trees stand behind the wall and fences, guarded by soldiers and M16s who are careful not to let the farmers linger too long, lest they have the chance to speak to their trees that hold wisdom and secrets in their roots, that empower, having lived for generations. They know of other times come and gone. They give hope and promise to a different tomorrow. They remind the farmers not to give up, that one day they will again share the same space. Until then, fear contaminates the earth, the air, and the eyes. Everyone is squinting, wondering what will happen next, trying to make sense out of senselessness. My head feels like it will explode. No matter how bad things are, I can't stomach a wall. It gets in the way. It blocks my view. It makes life hell on earth. I want to stand in the middle of the road, get in the way of the wall, block its path, rewrite history, prevent it from being written in this way. I know when Palestinians tried to stand in its way, they were shot or thrown in jail. No wonder people are minding their own business, as if just another building is going up to hold offices or apartments. Everyone is walking by without looking, but they know it's there. They can feel its path as if it's emerging from the earth rather than being shoved into place. They know one day they will fight it, but not today. Today, they have to go to the market, to work, to the doctor, and get their children off to school. But someday, they will tear down that wall, just as the Germans, east and west, tore down the Berlin Wall. One day, the Palestinians, and maybe even the Israelis, will know that day has come, where they will look at it, face it, and destroy it. No one knows what will come once the dust settles, but something else will emerge in its place. Like after a forest fire, plants reemerge, but the landscape is forever changed. New realities will creep over old ones and take shape, inviting us all to begin again. Do I have time for one more, or should we?
We're actually
Yeah, we're running out of time. Okay.
running out of time, but
All
maybe
right.
I want to take some questions.
Oh, sure, no problem.
For you,
Yeah.
Doctor. So we're gonna open it for a couple of questions, and if there's none from the audience, I have one, Doctor. I keep encouraging my aunts who have lived different eras of the war in Lebanon, against Israel, and the various episodes of the Lebanese civil war and the war with Israel. I keep telling them to write their memoir or record it, or the importance of that. What would you tell them to convince them of the importance of their oral narrative?
Well, I think storytelling is the most powerful instrument of change. And what I would tell them is to just sit with the memories, because the most compelling memories, the ones that have touched you deep in your soul and have changed you forever, are unforgettable. And they're the ones that if you share them, they allow other people to experience what you experienced. And so by writing down what I would call as a writer pivotal events, you know, you can just collect these memories, and then if you kind of sit with them, they will tell you what story they are telling. So when I did that with my own experience in Palestine, the golden thread was dignity. So I would love to know what their golden thread is. And there's nothing more powerful than a story. We've been telling stories as human beings forever, even before we knew how to write. And those are the things that allow us to know who we are, share, you know, build on our past, and dream of a future where we can all live with dignity. In the case of my story, so that's what I would tell them.
Also tell us where we can buy your book.
I have some copies tonight. If you want to buy one, I'd be happy to sign it. Otherwise, it's available anywhere books are sold. Okay.
Thank you, Dr.
Sure. Thank you. I can just leave that.
I'm familiar with my blood is for the queen. I want you to be streets while they lying on the TV. I ain't even government, the bone, they can be okay, cause still a country that got off with the treaty. This is more freedom, more liberation. And we ain't gonna give up on this reparation. Don't complain about the vision.
This is the way we're going to introduce Esa. Esa Mohamed, a performing artist, Dearborn native, and an activist. He's been very vocal both through his performing art and through his political statement on social media. Esa, thanks for coming today. I know last time you were sick, you weren't able to make
forgive me.
it.
I really wanted to make it last time, and I completely lost my voice. It was during Ramadan. I missed a couple of days from fasting. Like
Alhamdulillah, Ramadan Kareem.
No,
I wanted to ask you to tell us a little bit. I want to document some of your experience. Now, you've been in the heart and center of the protests taking place. Tell us, not everyone has been attending these protests. Tell us your point of view from inside this protest and your experience as an activist so far through this time.
Well, first off, I want to say that I appreciate people calling me an activist, but I truly don't feel like I do enough to even be called an activist. I show up to the protests. I just do what I can, you know. But from showing up to the protests, what I have seen, because for most of the world, the Palestine situation is brand new to them. They're just now discovering it. For us, for a lot of us that grew up Muslim or grew up in America, Arab or Muslims, this is something that we grew up with, you know. So we always were fighting for Palestine. I remember being a little kid, and we had in 5th grade in front of our the middle school in the South End. I grew up over there, and in front of Solano, we were protesting free Palestine. I'm like, what are we doing standing on this corner? What's that gonna make? You know, what kind of noise is that gonna make? But fast forward 14 years later, I'm in Washington, D.C., and there's a sea of people from all over the world, from every ethnicity, from every background, all cheering free Palestine, and people that have had enough with the current system and just taking a back seat and allowing people to completely destroy the fabrics of our society and to pin people against each other. So what I've been seeing at these protests, because just like David said, it's making a difference. I know people will say, what does going in the street and screaming do? I tell them, imagine if we weren't doing that, how bad it would have been. And imagine the pressure, or imagine without the pressure, how much more these people would get away with. And just like the Vietnamese or what was going on in Vietnam, it took many years. It took over 10 years of them fighting to get the liberation. This is the first time, because I also protested back in 2021, right? And there was also, like I said, for a lot of people that don't know, for them this is new after October 7, but Gaza was getting bombed in 2021 as well, and there was massive protests that came out of that. And during that time, I remember Joe Biden came to Detroit, and we protested, and I wasn't even planning to speak, but somehow I ended up with a mic and screamed until I lost my voice for the next 3 days from giving a speech. And Joe Biden was here, and when the reporters asked him, you know, what do you have to say about this? He basically said, because he was testing one of the cars in the Ford factory down the street, he basically told them, stand in front of the car, and after I drive, I'll let you know how I feel. Basically just completely ignoring the situation. But now everywhere he goes, every time he tries to do anything, like, he can't get away from it anymore. And that's because now it's continuous. In 2021, after that protest, I said, I'm never going to protest again. I feel like this was a waste of time. I'm tired. After the next day, everyone went away. For me, I've been making music since 2017. And when I started making music, it was about this type of stuff. It was always about either political, or Palestine has always been something I spoke about. And I kind of got away from it after a few years, because I felt like I'm talking to an empty room. No one's listening. No one cares. But like I said, fast forward to 2024, the entire world is standing up. And to the people who are still thinking that it doesn't make a difference, what was the saying? I'm only one person. What could I do? Said 7 billion people. It takes us to come. Every individual has to make the decision that I can make a change and show up. Because if everyone says that they can make a change and they all show up and they're all on the same mission, then you will make a change. But if everyone is standing and saying, oh, I can't do nothing, I'm gonna leave it for the next person, you show up and it's just a few people. But even the few people that do show up, they make a difference.
Thank you. Before I let the audience join the discussion, I want to ask you, what are some of the epiphanies or things that affected you during the protest, things that you saw you weren't expecting, or things that, stayed with you?
So I'm not sure if you guys seen on the news on the city of Dearborn 2 days ago, they stopped a car caravan. There was a protest we had, and basically we've done a few car caravans, and we'll ride through the streets, ton of cars with the flags. We'll go on the freeway. Sometimes they'll drive a little slow, cause a little traffic, but that's a part of protest. And the point is disruption. Yesterday, all we were doing is driving down Michigan Avenue. We're going to go to downtown, come back around, nothing too crazy. As we're driving down Michigan Avenue, we're seeing a lot of cars and stuff going on, but I start seeing a helicopter. I'm like, I know that's not for us, riding in this little 30-car caravan, just driving down the street. And now I'm seeing undercover cars, and I'm seeing all these different cruisers coming around, and I'm in the front, so I'm seeing everything firsthand. And we come on to 14th Street on Michigan Avenue just before Corktown, and I swear to God, I seen like it was probably like 14, 15 cruisers all swarm in, like 50 cops all jumping out of their cars and running to the car. I'm like, no way they're doing all this for. I had to turn around and make sure like more people didn't join. There's like 20 cars, 20 of us just riding slowly down Michigan Avenue with our flags out. And they shut down all the roads. They shut down entrances to the freeways. They shut down downtown. And I was like, bro, you guys really did all this just for us? At that point, I was honored. I was like, go ahead and arrest me. Make sure you guys get some good pictures, Thankfully, I didn't get arrested. Alhamdulillah. There was a few other people that did get arrested. They gave everybody tickets. They gave me a ticket basically they said blocking a lane and using an electronic while on my phone. So in my head, like the epiphany that I had is these people are really, really dedicated to completely silencing us and completely stopping us. And they're so scared that this little group of people just driving peacefully, had them bring out the entire police force, fuel a helicopter. How much of our tax dollars got used for them to fuel that helicopter, for them to just drive over and watch us? All this, it's crazy, because the people that call for peace are the people that are being subjected to the most aggression. The irony of it.
Right.
So what I've seen is that at the end of the day, the people protect the people, and the only way that change is going to happen is if we keep applying pressure and we keep fighting until change comes, because nothing happens overnight. Just like with anything, a tree is going to take many years to grow. And if we keep doing what we're doing, inshallah, we'll have a tree with many fruit that everybody could eat in, regardless of where you're from, what kind of, what your skin color is or what you believe in.
Thank you, Esa. Just to clarify for the recording, I heard that they were worried that you're going to block the Ambassador Bridge, because that's what happened earlier in the day in San Francisco. Was there any intention for the caravan to block the Ambassador Bridge? Well, you're the leading car, so.
I was the leading car, but they just told me that to be in front.
Right. Any question from the audience for Esa? Comments? Okay, Esa, one more thing. I'm sure you were either came young or you were born in the United States.
Yeah.
You feel your young generation that has grown in the United States, usually not very engaged in politics. This gives a lot of hope, especially when Palestinian children see that, and Arab children see that. They see, and children really all over the world, when they get an inspiration from American children actually being engaged and involved with social justice and political justice issues. Where do you feel this stems from? In 2021, the largest protest for Palestine came out. You would expect that Dearborn in the 60s and 70s, these are the most engaged people politically. But surprisingly, the youngest generation is the most engaged and coming out in droves for Palestine. What does this tell you? How do you reflect this message?
I always, because of, the first generations that came here, they're just coming here for survival. A lot of them came with $20 in their pocket and the clothes on the back if they had that,
The famous story.
So a generation or two later, we're born and we grew up here, so we're full citizens. I tell people all the time, my family's from Yemen, and I am proud of my Yemeni heritage, but I grew up here. I'm a born American citizen. If I go to Yemen, they're gonna make fun of me and call me, how like sometimes people make fun of people who come overseas, like over there, they're gonna joke around like that. But in my heart, I love America, but to love America, I want it to be a country that I'm proud of. I want it to be what it says it stands for. And I want it to be a country that's not a war machine and going and destroying all of the world and causing havoc at the expense of our backs. Because I could get into, it's a whole, deep conversation. But basically, I want the best for America. And the best for America is peace, is taking the better road, is changing of the system that applies, that basically takes advantage of its citizens. And our generation is a generation that's more connected more than ever. We have our phones, we have more resources to knowledge and history and really being able to do the homework to know what's going on. And we're mad because at the end of the day, the last generation didn't do a good job taking care of America, and all this colonialism and all this war and the military industrial complex is done a number of our society, and our generation is the one that's paying for it. So now they're making an economy full of young, angry people that have nothing but time now to protest and make stuff happen. Is going to make stuff happen.
Thank you. And
I'm sorry if I'm all over the place with these.
No problem. No, amazing. Who are some of your American role models?
My role models
from American history.
So I think the way I am is because I started listening to music when I was like in 7th grade, like really starting to listen to hip hop. And my first rapper that I was listening to was Tupac. And if anyone knows about Tupac, he was very F the system type of guy, but he spoke a lot of truth in his raps, and it was in a very aggressive, very blunt manner, straightforward, which, some people might get offended, but we're talking about people's lives and people being killed and massacred. I don't know. The biggest problem, I feel like sometimes people want to get on and have a very formal conversation. It's like, no, we got to get straight to the point, So a lot of my heroes came from like people like Tupac and people that just stood for justice, Malcolm X, of course. I would say Abraham Lincoln just a bit. Well, I don't know too much, but he's just a big guy to mention. But mainly like Tupac and Malcolm X for real.
Thank you, Esa.
I appreciate it.
Thank you. All right, we have, last but not least, we're gonna end with a very special segment by Dr. Morhaf Al Achkar, who currently works at Wayne State University. He's a performer. He's going to perform a song for us and actually sing, also involves singing. So I think this is, we hope that this is not the last time and that you will be a returning visitor to the Dearborn Open Mic. Thank you. Help you with that.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me. And it's hard to follow the earlier talks, and it's hard to introduce my songs either. It's hard to introduce my songs as well. So I will I'll just let them speak. The first one is from Syria. I like that one actually. That was tuning.
سوا وكلهم أكلتهم الشمس شو ذنبن كل هالبؤس كلهم أكلتهم الشمس شو ذنبن كل هالبؤس يلي راح شاف صورهم والخيال يلي راح شاف صورهم والخيال كده بلاد ما ترتاح كده بلاد ما ترتاح كده بلاد ما ترتاح ما في راحة للأرواح 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 ما في راحة للأرواح
Next song is for Shireen أبو عاقلة. ما رح تبكيك العين وبالقلب في 100 سكين عالشهيد لا ما في حزن ودمك انت غالي يا شيرين. شيرين هي شوكة بعين المحتل ومثل شعبي حر وما بينزل وكلنا رح نتعلم منها ودمها عنا كلنا هذا دين. فلسطين حرة ورح تبقى حرة ورح تبقى الأهل القدس وجنين والمحتل من أرضي يطلع برا وروحي تفدي دمها لشيرين وروحي تفدي شعبها لشيرين.
عالشهيد لما في حزن ودمك انتي غالي يا شيرين. ما راح تبكيك العين وبالقلب في 100 سكين وعالشهيد لما في حزن ودمك انتي غالي يا شيرين. شيرين حيشوك بعين المحتل ومثل شعبي حر وما بينزل كلنا رح نتعلم منها ودمها كلنا عنا صدقين. شيرين هي شوكة بعين المحتل ومثله شعبي حر وما بينزل وكلنا رح نتعلم منها دمها عنا كلنا هدادي شيرين هي شوكة بعين المحتل ومثله شعبي حر وما بينزل وكلنا رح نتعلم منها ودمها عنا كلنا هدادي ما رح تيجي العين بالقلب في 100 سكين عالشهيد لا ما في حب ودمك انتي غالي يا شيرين فلسطين حرة ورح تبقى حرة ورح ترجع لأهل القدس وجنين والمحتل من أرضي يطلع برا وروحي تفدي دمها يا شيرين فلسطين حرة ورح تبقى حرة ورح ترجع لأهل القدس وجنين والمحتل من أرضي يطلع برا وروحي تفدي شعبها ما رح تيجي العين وبالقلب في 100 سكين عالشهيد لا ما في حزن ودمك انتي غالي يا شيرين ودمك انتي غالي يا شيرين ودمك انتي غالي يا شيرين
Thank you, Dr. Morhaf. If you just the titles of these two songs or the topic, the first one was about a Syrian child who drowned on his way, as it has been the news of many immigrants or exiles from Syria. And the second was about the Palestinian journalist Shireen Abu Akleh, the American Palestinian journalist who got assassinated by the Israeli army. Thank you, Dr. Morhaf. Thank you, everyone. We've exceeded the time. Thank you for making Dearborn Open Mic a reality. And all of us here are volunteers, so please support Dearborn Open Mic by bringing out your ideas, inviting people to it, and keeping it alive. Thank you very much.